Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson about patterns and shapes. If you're wondering where I got the idea for this lesson, I'll give you a sneak peek. I walked by Walter's dog dish the other day and I thought, that's cool, it's a spiral. And then I thought to myself, I don't think I've taught the word spiral. I should think of 25 or 30 other words that we use to talk about patterns and shapes that we see around us. And it was actually pretty easy to think of that many. So in this lesson, in this English lesson, we're going to learn about patterns and shapes, things like mosaics and mazes and spirals and swirls. And I don't want to give too much away, but I think you will enjoy the lesson. So once again, welcome to this English lesson about patterns and shapes. Spiral, a shape that circles around and moves inward or outward. So this is a classic spiral. A spiral goes in a circle, but slowly gets smaller. Although if you start in the middle and describe it, it goes in a circle and slowly gets bigger. The reason I did this lesson is because Walter has a dog dish that looks like this. The reason it's in the shape of a spiral is because he eats too fast. If we give him a normal dog dish or a normal dog bowl, what we would say, wolfs his food down too quickly. I think sometimes dogs don't think when they do things. So we bought a spiral dog dish. What this does is it makes it more challenging for him to get his food. It slows him down quite a bit. He still eats all of it, but I think it's a little more like a game now for him. So a spiral, exactly what you are seeing here, a shape that circles around and moves inward or outward. And fun fact, if you spin a spiral, it's quite mesmerizing. When something is mesmerizing, it means you like to look at it. Loop, a shape or line that curves around and crosses or connects back to itself. So if you look at the end of this string, you'll see that there is a loop on the end. Sometimes when you're working with string or rope, you will put a loop on the end. I'm trying to see. I think this might be fishing line, but you might put a loop on the end for various reasons. And this little thing on the end is a loop. The string goes around and either crosses over or connects back to itself with a knot. I'll talk about that later. And then you have on the end what we call a loop, a shape or line that curves around and crosses or connects back to itself. Lattice. So let me say that again, lattice. Now we eat lettuce, but this pattern is a lattice. So I hope you can hear the difference. A pattern made of crossed lines or strips with open spaces. You will often see lattice when you sit on someone's deck. They might have a fence that's made of lattice, which is pieces of wood that cross, a pattern made of crossed lines or strips with open spaces. Or they might have something like this. They have some planters, and it looks like the plants, some are vines, and they are growing up the lattice. Notice I'm using this word in two ways. The pattern is called a lattice, and the actual, like if you go to the hardware store, you can ask for lattice, and they will give you that type of wood where it's all connected together. But generally, we use that word to describe any shape where two things are kind of woven together to make a pattern like that. Lattice. Maze, a confusing pattern of paths with many turns and dead ends. So a dead end is when you go down a road or street and it ends. You can't continue. You have to turn around in order to leave. A maze has a lot of turns, paths, and dead ends. If you ever had a book as a child with different kinds of word puzzles and other puzzles in it, it most likely had some mazes where you had to use a pencil to find your way from one end of the maze to another. I imagine some of you right now are looking at this maze and trying to find your way through. I just did. It is solvable, but I can't put my finger on the screen. I think there used to be, is there a way for me to get my mouse on the screen? I don't remember. Anyways, a maze, a confusing pattern of paths with many turns and dead ends. Some farmers will make a corn maze or a sunflower maze, although corn grows taller, so it's better. So anyways, a confusing pattern of paths with many dead ends, or many turns and dead ends. Wave, a smooth moving shape that rises and falls. So of course, when you go to the ocean, you will see waves in the water, but we also have other waves. There's radio waves, there's X-rays, I think this might be a sine wave. So when you study math, you might look at a sine wave, which is a smooth moving shape that rises and falls. Pretty fun. This is also a wave, but not the kind that we're talking about. So wave, I'm going to guess this is a sine wave because I think that's what I searched for. A smooth moving shape that rises and falls. Swirl. So this was the best example I could find for swirl. In Ontario, Canada, and in other parts of the world, you can get what we call soft serve ice cream. And when they put the soft serve ice cream into a bowl or into a cone, they will use a twisting circular movement and it creates this pattern. Sometimes this is even called swirled ice cream, or they serve it on a cone in a swirl. But if you look, it does go around. It's kind of like, it's similar to a spiral, I guess, except it can build up. But this is the best example I can come up with. A twisting circular movement or pattern that looks exactly like this. And in this case is also extremely tasty and not good for you. Coil, something wound into a series of circles or rings. So notice the second word is wound, which indicates the verb to basically take something and do this, okay? And it's not necessarily a spring. So a spring is similar, but when you compress the spring, it bounces back. A coil doesn't necessarily do that. I'm getting very technical, I'm sorry, but this is a coil. This is actually copper wire, and you can use the verb as well. The copper wire is coiled around, or you can coil the copper wire around something like this. So coil, something wound into a series of circles or rings. And then helix. I think most of us are familiar with the double helix, but a helix is a spiral shape that moves upward or downward like a spring. This word is not used a lot in the English language, except to talk about our DNA and to talk about the double helix, which is, I guess, two helixes that go around each other that are connected. So helix, a spiral shape that moves upward or downward like a spring. Vortex, a spinning movement of air or liquid around a center point. When you pull the plug out of the bottom of your sink, and as the water starts to drain, it will eventually create a vortex. And it will spin one way if you're in the northern hemisphere, and it will spin the other way if you're in the southern hemisphere. I believe I'm correct there. Remember, this is an English lesson, not a science lesson. But yes, when you see this, we can also use the word swirl in this case. When you see the water swirl around the bottom of the sink, that is a vortex. We also use this to describe a weather system here in Canada. Sometimes a swirling air mass comes from the north in the winter, and we call it a polar vortex, and it makes it very, very cold. But vortex, a spinning movement of air or liquid around a center point. And notice Bob the Canadian spelt center the American way here. I apologize. That happens sometimes. It's just the way it is. Zigzag, a line or pattern with sharp turns in different directions. This shirt would drive me crazy. If I saw someone wearing this shirt, it would make my eyes, like it would just make me feel strange. I have trouble looking at it right now. But you can see that the line zigzags. The line goes up and down. It takes sharp turns in different directions, and they are all the same. Like, it's not random or chaotic. It's definitely a very logical, orderly pattern of a white line or a black line going up and down, and then a yellow line below it. So zigzag, a line or pattern with sharp turns in different directions. Ripple, A small wave or series of small waves on a surface. That's a fun word to say, ripple. When you throw a stone into water, it will make ripples. The water will ripple. And a ripple, basically, you'll see a circle expand and another circle expand and another circle expand. They're all small waves. If you were to look at it from the side, you would see the wave pattern. But ripple, a small wave or series of small waves on a surface, usually in a circle, although it doesn't have to be in a circle. But this would be the best example I can think of. When you throw a rock in, we would maybe call them concentric circles where they ripple out. Curve, a line that bends smoothly instead of being straight. People who have really expensive sports cars would love a road that has a curve in it or lots of curves because I think they enjoy pretending they're race car drivers going around the curves. But yes, a curve is a line that bends smoothly instead of being straight. Arc. So when I was researching this one, first of all, en français, on dit arc-en-ciel. So an arc is a perfectly curved line. Technically, an arc is part of a circle. But when you look at a rainbow, there's no other part, to my knowledge, of the shape. There's just the arc in the sky, arc-en-ciel. So here we have an arc, a perfectly curved line. What that means is it's not a curved line that has some oddness to it. It's like part of a circle. It's perfect from one end to the other. And you get beautiful things like a rainbow, which is an arc, a perfectly curved line. This person seems very happy. I think if you look in the distance, the person in blue has maybe found the pot of gold that they say is at the end of the rainbow. I've never found it. I've never been able to find the end of the rainbow, but apparently there's a pot of gold there. Twist, a shape formed by turning or winding something. That's why we call this a twist tie. So if you have a little piece of wire, it's kind of like wire in the middle of some paper or plastic, and it often comes on the end of a loaf of bread on the plastic bag. There's a twist tie. We call it a twist tie because you twist it and it forms that shape. So twist, a shape formed by turning or winding something. There's a lot of things in the world where you will twist. It's even an action not related to the shape or pattern where you twist to get the lid off of something. But this would be a good explanation of twist as a shape or pattern. It's a shape formed by turning or winding something. A knot, I think we're all familiar with this, a fastening made by tying something into loops. So if you have ever tied your shoes, you know how to make a knot. If you have ever had a rope and had to make sure your boat doesn't sail away by itself, you need to tie a knot when you come to the dock. So a knot, a fastening made by tying something into loops. And there are many different types of knots in the world. Grid, a pattern of straight crossing lines that form squares or rectangles. This person has basically a rubber mat that has a grid on it, and they are cutting out different shapes from paper, and the grid probably helps them make every shape the correct size and helps them cut in the right direction. So if you ever do crafts, you're probably familiar with this. If you have ever done graphing by hand with a pencil in math, you probably use what's called graph paper. Graph paper has a series of lines that form a grid, and every single box on the grid is exactly the same size. So grid, a pattern of straight crossing lines that form squares or rectangles. Web, you are probably familiar with this one as well. A net-like pattern of connected lines or threads. This is a spider web. If you have ever watched any of the Spider-Man movies, you know that Spider-Man shoots webs as well, although he tends to shoot like straight strings. I don't know if he often makes an actual web like a spider, but this is a web, a net-like pattern of connected lines or threads. I'm always amazed that at night in our barn, there will be places where there are no spider webs, and the next morning there will be a spider web. So during the night, a spider created a net-like pattern of connected lines or threads, and then they hopefully can catch a few flies or mosquitoes, particularly mosquitoes. I strongly encourage all spiders to make webs to catch mosquitoes. That would be the best thing in my opinion. Mosaic, a picture or pattern made from many small colored pieces. So you'll often see this in flooring. People will have a floor in their house, or maybe they'll have an outdoor seating area where they've gotten stones or tiles or other small colorful things like rocks, and they've made a mosaic. Basically, they've made a picture or pattern from many small colored pieces. Let me say the word again, mosaic. It's a fun word to say as well. This is a mosaic. This is a very cool pattern made from small colored pieces. Honeycomb, a pattern of connected six-sided shapes like a beehive. So if you've ever seen a beehive, they build what's called a honeycomb. And inside the honeycomb, I don't know how they exactly do this. Again, this isn't a science lesson, but the honeycomb is used to store honey for future use, as well as other things. I'm not sure if you're born in a honeycomb. Anyways, someone who's more of a bee expert could tell us what is happening there. But this is a pattern that looks like a beehive, so we call it a honeycomb pattern. So a pattern of connected six-sided shapes like a beehive. And then plaid, a pattern of crossed horizontal and vertical stripes or lines, which makes a beautiful pattern. This is actually a very fashionable colored shirt right now in Canada, although with spring coming, less people are wearing these, but certainly like oranges, burnt oranges and deep yellows and black has become a fashionable thing to wear. But this we would call a plaid shirt, a pattern of crossed horizontal and vertical shapes. Very cool. I should start dressing in a more fashionable way, and then I would just wear this shirt during the live lesson. Paisley, a pattern with curved teardrop shapes and detailed designs. I have not seen a Paisley pattern shirt in a long time, but I did want to put this on here because I've always thought this was a very cool pattern. I have never owned a Paisley shirt, but if you see, the pattern is these teardrop shapes, and there's a very intricate, detailed design. So Paisley, a pattern with curved teardrop shapes and detailed designs. It is a pretty nice looking shirt though, but it is a little bit, in English, we might say the pattern is very busy. When you say a pattern is busy, it means like the zigzag shirt, the pattern was very busy. It's like a lot for your eyes to look at. Polka dot, a pattern made of evenly spaced round dots. So this is a polka dot hat. Sometimes polka dot is one word, but my understanding is the most correct way to write it is as two words. So you could have a polka dot dress, a polka dot shirt, a polka dot hat. And generally, it's not a super common pattern in fashion, but you do see it from time to time where someone is wearing something that is polka dotted. It's kind of a fun word too. A lot of these words are fun to say. Polka dot. Stripes, a pattern made of long, narrow lines. This shirt has horizontal stripes. You can also have a shirt with vertical stripes that go this way. But if they cross, it's not a striped shirt anymore. It's now plaid or has a checkered pattern. So if you've ever read the books Where's Waldo, he has a red and white shirt like this, a red and white striped shirt, which is a pattern made of long, narrow lines. Checkerboard, a pattern of alternating dark and light squares. So you can probably guess where this word comes from. If you ever play checkers or if you play the game chess, it is played on basically a board or, well, it could be cardboard, but it's checkerboard where there are black and white squares, or they can be other colors as well, red and black or something like that. But if you have pants like this, we would say the pattern is a checkerboard pattern, a pattern of alternating dark and light squares. Symmetrical and asymmetrical. Last two things. When something is symmetrical, we're saying that it is having the same shape or pattern on both sides. If you look at one side of this drawing of a tree versus the other side, they are identical. If you folded it in half, they would match perfectly. It is symmetrical. It has symmetry. That's the other word we would use. This tree, on the other hand, is asymmetrical. It's a tree where it does not have the same shape or pattern on both sides. So symmetrical, having the same shape or pattern on both sides. By the way, your face is symmetrical. One side of your face is the same as the other. And then asymmetrical, not having the same shape or pattern on both sides.